Yo, dude, we're here at Precision Engine Worx. This is James. He built my 14-to-1 compression LS motor that's in the Pro car and does nasty things. This is the motor. So I talked to you guys about building a new motor and wanting to build something that's exciting, fresh to the community of drifting. I know that there's a bunch of guys who are using this engine in off-road applications, or they're using this engine in drag racing applications, but there hasn't really been anybody who's used it in a drift application on like a larger scale. There's a couple guys who have a swap done. Huge shout out, I think, to Novek53. That guy has done a ton of videos on this engine, but without further ado, the Chevy 4200. So if you guys don't know anything about this engine, that's not abnormal. I didn't know anything about it either. I found out a lot of stuff from a dude named Calvin Nelson. He runs a YouTube channel called Nivlac57. Him and his family have been doing a bunch of stuff with 4200s. I found out about this engine because of that guy, and then I learned a ton of stuff about it. As we dive into this motor, one of the big things I want to do is I want to have James explain to me and to you guys why this could be potentially a really good platform for drifting, and just kind of run through it, maybe get some information. And then our goal is to build this engine out, turn it into a monster, throw it into, I'm not sure what car yet. We'll find a car for it. We'll probably have to build a whole new car for it. Hannah's gonna love that. In the meantime, this is the stock form of this engine, and we'll get into kind of a teardown. James has already taken this apart. Him and Barry over here at Precision Engine Worx, they're doing amazing work. They're doing all kinds of stuff, and the boys wanted to jump in on this project and essentially set up something that could be pretty affordable, relatively speaking, when it comes to like the Toyota motors and the 1Js and the 2Js. I think you'll be surprised at the price. A built one of these is coming in pretty close to what a stock 2J is going to cost us here in America. So let's dive into the 4200 with James. This long block, we got it for about 250 bucks. I think Barry got the guy down to 245, which shout out Barry for the $5.
Extra $5 off
Extra
there.
$5. Barry's behind the camera. Casey's here. Say hi, Casey.
What up?
Okay, so Casey from AK, he's the one who's gonna be doing the turbo manifolds, the oil pans, the adapter plate for the transmission, the intake manifolds. Casey's gonna be detrimental to getting this motor put into a bunch of different chassis, so just keep an eye on them. But Casey has a 2J, stock one there at the shop, and we're gonna pull some measurements just to kind of give you guys an idea of the size comparison between these two. From the back of the block to the front of the block, or let's just say the crank pulley, what measurement do you have? So 20 and a half is what yours is? So we'll be 2 inches essentially longer, but 4.2
Those
liter.
have that.
It's almost even to the block. See the pipe? It's almost even to the.
Oh, okay. So it doesn't really add anything. The only thing it does change is how far you can get the head into the firewall. So although it is a couple inches longer, you don't have that piping here, so you can potentially move the motor further back. So how far is it from the head to the water port?
5/8.
So it'll realistically, this is 2 inches essentially longer, but with that back, you can move this 5/8 further back potentially. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not that much bigger. On the 2J, you're a 3.0. On this motor, it's a 4.2. So that's huge. So it'll probably get down to a 4.0, depending on the stroke that we go with. But just relatively speaking, so that they know what the height of the valve cover to the base of the block is. So we're about 22 and about 20 on the lower point.
Oh man. How long is yours? What's the length?
22 at a shorter spot, and then 20 something at a higher spot.
No, mine is 2J is 18 and 3/4.
So 18 to 22, we're gonna have a higher setup, which you can, on some of them, these are aluminum, so you can kind of cut the oil cap off and you can move it somewhere else. Plastic one's gonna be a little bit tougher, but to figure out if somebody's gonna make something, or
he gonna make motor mounts and stuff?
He'll make motor mounts.
You just drop the motor mount another
Yeah.
1.5 to 2 inches.
Yeah, so there's solutions there. And then the last thing I want to look at is the width.
Now compared to yours.
Yeah, that thing's ridiculously small.
It looks so. Look at the bolt pattern.
Yeah, the bolt pattern, the freaking back of the head.
It looks so close on this right here in the starter.
Let's measure this spot, the width of the head. Measure side to side, so 10 inches. Yeah.
My 2J is about 9.5.
9.5. Okay, so we're not much wider. We're a little bit taller. We're a little bit longer as well. But we still have 4.2 liter. Loser. No, just kidding. And then not to mention also $300 and also full aluminum block as well. So that's huge. You get bigger displacement and you get a lighter block as well. So it is bigger. There's going to be fitment issues that we're going to be dealing with, but most of that stuff is going to be Casey's problem. Casey's going to have to figure all that stuff out. So the motor, the 4200 is going to be a little bit bigger by a few inches. It will be lighter by a substantial amount. And then the bore size is a lot bigger as well. So this, in my opinion, has the potential to be the better option from the two. Obviously, budget is the better option. Weight is going to be the better option as well, right off the rip. And then displacement, that's going to be better as well. So a lot of things are leaning toward this being a really, really good engine to turbo, to boost, and to make some good power with. The biggest thing was going to be it fitting in a car. What cars will it fit in, and what is it relative to a couple of other size-wise, relative to a couple of other inline sixes. So it looks smaller than a BMW motor, but it's a little bit bigger than a JZ. All right, Casey, thank you, dude. Appreciate it. Stay tuned. AK is going to be making a bunch of swap parts for this motor to potentially your car.
Sure do.
All right, brother.
Already all in, so you got to now.
Be safe. So what is the Chevy 4200?
Chevy 4200 is a 4.2 liter dual overhead cam straight six. A very common motor. They're in every junkyard in every city in every state.
Yeah.
They're cheap. You know, you could pick one up. We got this one obviously for a really good deal. But I'd say they're in the range of $300 to $400. You could find one, you know, a good takeout still running when it got taken out. It's a very good starting point for somebody who doesn't have the budget to build a twin turbo 2JZ.
Yeah,
you know,
something
or a
gnarly.
big pro charged LS or something like that. You know, you get anybody could be capable of getting one of these and building a nice motor out of it.
A couple of things that come to mind. First is like the dimensions of this, how big it is, how wide, how long it is, because of what it costs and what it is. One of the big things though is it's a 4.2 liter.
Yeah.
And with the JZs, the biggest you're getting is a 3.0 from the 2J, a 2.5 from the 1J, and then the only way to go bigger than that is to really build an engine that's going to cost a ton of money. The going rate, at least here in California for a 2JZ, is around the $7,000 to $10,000 mark, and that's usually a stock one. But with something like this, instead of having to bore and punch out a Japanese engine, you're already starting with 4.2 liters.
Yeah.
So you're almost double the 1J, and then you're 1.2 liter bigger than the 3.0. The only thing is that like, what do you think that this thing's going to be able to handle? Because no one's really done it. I know Nivlek has done some amazing stuff. He did 1,004 wheel horsepower in his Camaro, and that thing like looks like it's gonna rip.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like, and I don't know, maybe you guys have seen it, but I haven't seen any videos of it driving just yet. And then what does that look like? Like, does that look like you can do that all day? Does it look like you can do that a couple of times? And not to say that they're not building an engine that couldn't do it, but like, I don't feel like this has been beat up and abused and like really strained and tested. Potential. Yeah, I feel like there's something there that's left.
You get 1,000 horsepower. I'm sure he's not CNC porting the head. You know, might not be changing cam profile, stuff like that. But the cost difference in this versus like the 2JZ or a motor like that is you could do a lot more to this and still be at the point of buying a stock 2JZ.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you could do a forged rods, forged pistons, cam profile change, and you're still not even going to be at the price of getting a 2JZ. Anybody right out of high school that has a part-time job, full-time job, you know, could potentially save and afford one of these and not have to save for a whole year.
Yeah, right.
You know, and spend every dollar in their bank. So that's the cool thing about this.
There's a couple of things that stand out to me right away. Right off the rip, when I'm looking at this versus a JZ, when you're looking straight at the top, I mean, it is wider, but I would say it's probably only wider by like maybe 1.5 inches. I'd be surprised if this was 2 inches wider. Now the front here is pretty freaking wide. They're pretty fat. And a lot of like aftermarket support. That's one thing, is that this motor does have a lot of aftermarket support. It just hasn't really gone viral or public. Right. It's not like really accessible public knowledge. And Calvin Nelson has done like a really good job at bringing this motor to light on YouTube and showing that there is aftermarket support. Calvin's been posting about this. He's got people who do cams now, new profile cuts and stuff. The springs for the valves he's got kind of figured out as well. They already figured out pistons, they figured out rods, they figured out all that stuff. So it's happening. But if you're like me and you have, you know, your people who you trust, that's how I am with these dudes and with Josh. FTA, you guys, we went and did the chaser, they did the wiring harness. So jumping into this, I wanted to get Josh involved and James and Barry involved and say, let's see what we can do on this side of the country. What can we get done over here? What kind of power can we make? Is this motor going to be something that is good for the people, for them to go and invest in and buy and stuff? And okay, so the JZs are notorious for being great engines, which they are. But one of the things that they lack in is the weight department. Long block to long block, you're getting with this a full aluminum head and full aluminum block right off the rip.
Yep. Everything's aluminum, oil pan, timing cover, plastic valve cover, but everything else aluminum.
And on top of it, you're still getting that 4.2 liter.
Yeah.
And like, to me, that makes the most sense, especially jumping into like the LS world. The displacement is drastically different. So what are some reasons you would suggest building this motor over like a JZ? We know cost is substantially different.
That's probably the biggest, that and availability. These are in every junkyard in every city in every state in the country.
They have
multiple.
To be. Right.
There's a junkyard walking distance from here. I bet you we could get 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah.
know? For the aftermarket stuff, I know a lot of people do 2JZ aftermarket stuff here, but at the end of the day, this is a GM motor. There's, you know, once it takes off, there's going to be a lot of people that jump on that bandwagon, just like they did with the LS, you know, when it went from small block to LS. Just the way they're designed, the whole main bolts and the cap configuration, all that stuff, I think they'll handle as much as a 2JZ.
It's a bold statement to say it'll handle as much as a 2J. Yeah. And I know that there's a bunch of you guys who are like huge 2JZ fans, but
theoretically it should.
Theoretically it should.
Yeah.
Let's look at that main. Let's flip this thing over. All right, so when it comes to a boosted application, how important is the bottom end of the engine?
That's probably your most important part, is the rods, the crank, the main setup. And for the crank, if you're building a drift car, it's never at 2,500 RPM. You're always on that rev limiter.
If you're a weenie, it's at 2,500
exactly.
RPM.
So the nice thing about these motors is the crankshaft has 12 counterweights. So every cylinder has 2 counterweights per cylinder.
So these 2 weights here per that one rod.
Yep.
Okay.
At a high RPM, you could balance it in a lot better. It's like running a 8 counterweight on an LS. You know, there's less flex, everything. So the crank is designed better than a lot of straight 6 engines. That's why I like this one. And then the main girdle, most people call that. Once it's all tightened down, it's pretty much you have one main cap. It's not like the LS where you have 1, 1, 1, 1.
Yeah.
This adds a lot of rigidity to the build.
Because you're essentially strapping them all together. This is going to be your main cap here.
Yeah.
And you'll have a second one, and so on and so forth.
This is the physical main cap. So
physical main cap.
These bolts out, this is just like on the old school small blocks. They'd run the stud girdles for the mains and the rocker arms and all that. It just helps at high RPM with the flex.
Yeah, you're trying to get rid of the yard sale.
Exactly, yeah.
Situation. So it bridges them all together,
exactly.
and it gives it way more rigidity.
Yep.
And this is stock. This isn't something
factory.
That's aftermarket.
No, that's factory.
So that's sick. So for your $250, Like this is
You
one
get
of the
an
things that's
upgraded
coming.
part already that just adds a little safety factor, I guess you could say.
So bottom end's very important. The rigidity that this girdle is going to add is huge. And then I think for like the modifiers out there, one of the things that I think is pretty sick about this is that the oil pump, Barry was showing me, it bolts to this front timing cover that goes on. But just like the LS, it still sits within the block, and it's got a pickup tube, so you can turn it into a front sump, you could turn it into a rear sump, you could turn it into a side sump, you could put that thing almost anywhere you want.
If you look at the drive gear, it's almost identical to the LS.
Exactly like an LS.
Obviously smaller diameter, but the oil pump is driven pretty much the same way. Obviously on an LS, the oil pump bolts to the block, but this is just a normal, like, Ecotech style oil pump.
Yeah, and then with it bolted to this is where your pickup tube will go, and you can route that wherever the hell you want.
Just like that. And then your pickup tube bolts from here just like the LS, and then goes down straight to right here. So it'd be simple to modify it, make it a rear sump. You just cut the tube and extend it.
Super easy. Make a whole new oil pan.
Yep.
Call it a day.
The other nice thing about these motors is it's kind of like the little 2.4 and 2-liter Ecotechs is the only gasket you're going to have is a head gasket. Everything else usually AC Delco or silicone sealant all around. So if you do have to pull something off, you're not searching for a gasket, you just got to have a sealer. So that makes it a little bit nicer.
That is pretty rad. So far, looks good. It looks like it's going to be able to handle a bunch of power. So aluminum block. My understanding is that this has steel sleeves in it. So it's a sleeve block as well. Is getting like better sleeves an option?
Oh yeah.
You could get sleeves no problem, or how does that look?
I would say like entry level.
Yeah.
We could build this and leave everything in the bottom end stock. I would prefer to change the rods if they're going to run boost.
Yeah.
Rods and pistons. That's all you got to do. Crank will be fine, but if somebody wants to really turn it up, then I'm sure Darton or somebody could make a sleeve for it. Make a wet sleeve, forged rods and pistons, and I know somebody could figure out a way to make this out of steel.
The
which
girdle.
would make this stronger too.
Which would help drastically. I wonder if there's a way to take this girdle and then somehow connect it to the block still, so that there's just like extra, like this bottom end's not going anywhere. I think one of the biggest selling points is cost. Getting the motor is not going to cost anything. Having you guys build it, that really is relatively cheap in comparison to like building out a full LS or building out, you know, even a JZ.
Right, a built JZ.
Something like that. Like this is already going to be very affordable. The other thing with it being GM, parts are going to be
everywhere,
dude. So
probably at AutoZone, you know,
dude. And we haven't even tried yet. Like we haven't even I'd like to try the experiment. Like let's just call AutoZone and see if they have an oil pump for this motor.
Right.
This motor is from, I believe it goes all the way up to 2009, and it goes back to 2002 or 3 or something like that. And it came in Chevy Trailblazers, and it came in GMC Envoys. And like you probably don't know what those look like because you never like thought about it. You've seen them, they're ugly as hell, and that's why you never like cared to store it in your brain. But those things are freaking everywhere, dude. They're all over the country, littered everywhere. So we have a solid bottom end. We have the girdle. We have the 12 counterweighted crank. We have an aluminum block with sleeves in it, and a dual overhead cam system.
And if you look at the other thing I like about these motors, if you look at the timing system, it's simple. You got 2 guides and a tensioner.
That's it.
That's it.
Very simple.
Yeah. And a lot of people are intimidated with the dual overhead cam stuff just because you got to have all the marks lined up. But this one will be simple. GM kept it simple.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things that GM is good at. Let's flip this thing back over and look back at the head. So simplicity, I think this is the most complicated part. What am I looking at exactly?
So they call these a cam follower.
Okay.
And then this is technically the lifter, slides into this bucket down here. And another thing that's nice about the GM motors is a lot of like Hondas and stuff, they'll use a spring under cup system where you have to shim them.
Yeah.
Like, so if you do a valve job, you gotta shim them correctly or else you don't get the right preload.
Okay.
Could either hang valves open or create lash. Again, if you look, GM made it very simple. You don't have none of that.
So
you don't have to adjust valve train at all.
So that lifter on the backside is going to be pressurized with oil.
Yeah.
So that at higher RPM gets stiffer.
Yep.
Right? And then you have the cam rolling over, pushing on the arm there.
Yep, the follower.
That follower, and then the follower is pushing down on top of the valve.
Yep.
So when it comes to keeping a valve train alive at high RPM, what are some of like the simple things to look at?
Valve springs.
Valve springs?
Yeah. So other than that, I mean, the cam followers, they don't care what RPM it is, because all they're doing is pushing down. You know,
Okay.
you don't have a push rod that's pushing, so at high RPM, everything starts flexing and moving and all that. That's why I say the dual overhead cam stuff is nice, because you don't have to worry about push rod length. You don't have to worry about, you know, valve geometry, any of that stuff. So this is what makes it nice and easy to get high RPM out of. That's why some of the, you know, the Toyota 2JZs, we'll spin those things high.
We're gonna jump into this engine. We're gonna tear it apart. James is going to do his magic. Barry's gonna be involved in this. We're gonna see kind of what it looks like to build the bottom end of this. But the other thing the boys wanna do is get one, strap a turbo to it, just go full Big Bang Theory. I mean, I'm excited to figure it out.
I just want to see some fireworks or parts hit the ground, you know?
Into the yard sale.
I haven't got to see that very much.
Yeah.
Our stuff stays together.
So one of the other things, I mean, you talked about really quickly the CNC porting on the head. The intake side looks freaking giant.
Yeah.
Like this is almost like a square port on an LS3, just flipped on its side. So like, I mean, who knows if that's even going to need to be done, but the exhaust side.
The exhaust is tiny, and so when you're running a turbo car, the turbo works off what?
It's real small
The
exhaust.
exhaust. That would be the side I'm focused on more, would be the exhaust side of it. We get 1,000 horsepower out of a stock head, what's the point in doing a CNC unless somebody really just wants to get 1,200?
And they just want to get out of hand.
Right.
So the exhaust ports, yeah, I mean, those could get opened up. The intake ports, probably like a polish job or something, but even then, like, what are you really gaining? The other thing I noticed that's different on this relative to the JZ platform is that you have a variable valve timing on the exhaust side instead of on the intake side. Why would they do that?
If I had to guess, I'd probably say something with the emissions.
So I wonder if there's a way to like either lock this cam out, or I mean, and this would probably be more leaning toward Josh's department with the tuning and all of that, but I'm curious to find out if there is a benefit to controlling the exhaust side, and also if there's a benefit to controlling the exhaust side in a boosted application.
Yeah.
Like, can we change the timing on it or something to allow that explosion or that ignition to get through there to help spool the turbo faster? You know what I'm saying? Like something like an anti-lag.
Yeah, I'm sure we could lock that out.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody makes one yet, because this is just starting to kind of pop off, these motors.
These motors are starting to get popular.
Like with GM, they make lockout kits for the variable valve timing on the LS. So,
Right.
GM doesn't, but Comp does. So I'm sure if they don't right now, eventually somebody will be making that. You know, where we could just lock this out and have a totally different cam cut for it. You know, because that's what's going to be the limiting factor on power is cam profile.
I'm excited to see, one, what we do with it and how far we get. But this motor is going to take off. So this package completely built is going to be sub 10 grand.
Yeah, the built one will be under 10.
Which is crazy, because that's like, again, we're at stock 2JZ prices. I'm like really excited to see what this thing can do. So if you haven't yet, go buy a 4200, because it's going to happen. Get your core ready. The boys over here are going to be doing a bunch of experimenting, and I'll be the sacrificial lamb for this one.
The guinea pig,
I don't give a damn, I'm down. I'll guinea pig the hell out of this, and if you guys like, when you guys are ready, bring your motor over here, have the boys put it all together, build it for you guys, and go slap it in your car and go get some drifting done. So 4200 series coming with the boys at Precision Engine Worx, James and Barry. So sick. I'm excited. Dude, I'm pumped.
Can't wait.
Let's get it done. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for this thing. It's going to be nasty, boys. Hold fast.